Better to keep him imprisoned.
And out of mischief.
Hey guys, hello gorgeous. Back with another 80s Toy Museum virtual tour. Can you believe we're on part 6? And we're only halfway done. Today we'll be taking a look at the Mint on Card wall. While I love to set most of my toys free and appreciate them as three-dimensional works of art, a big part of nostalgia for me was looking at the carded figures hanging from their pegs in toy stores, imprisoned in a plastic bubble and out of mischief, i.e. dust. And so the first image that welcomes you as you walk into the 80s Toy Museum is a recreation of what a toy aisle looked like in the 80s. Because for me, it's not just about the toy, it's about the card art and the iconic logos as well. I'll start off today's tour with the custom sign that I talked about in episode 1. This beauty was a present from my beauty, my wife Luana, and it was the missing piece I didn't even know I needed. Until I put this sign up, I didn't realize that Toys R Us was just as magical a part of growing up in the 80s as the toys were.
More games, more toys, oh boy! I wanna be a Toys R Us kid!
It was like a mini theme park where all of these amazing characters cohabitated. It takes up a bit of real estate on the wall, so I couldn't help but put a shelf in front to hold a few odds and ends that didn't fit anywhere else, and to represent the variety Toys R Us offered. There's a couple different versions of one of my favorite Joes, Sergeant Slaughter, Optimus Prime, a couple of G.I. Joe Hawks, Colonel and General versions, along with Duke, RoboCop, the Ultimate Warrior, die-cast General Lee and Thunderhawk minicars, my original Gizmo Mogwai from Gremlins, and an extra special piece.
Jeffrey, what are we going to do when we get to Toys R Us?
Me, of course.
It's just not Toys R Us without Jeffrey, and I picked this little guy up while volunteering at an event for Autism Speaks Canada. Okay, on to the carded figures. You may have seen these guys tucked away in the top left corner behind the Star Wars shelf on Strut B. It's Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future.
The resistance movement that will one day bring Lord Dredd down.
They aren't that valuable, and I picked them up for next to nothing. But they're that garnish I talked about in an earlier episode that completes the look and feel of the 80s. One of the most fun parts about being a kid in the 80s was peg hunting. Figures weren't ever organized in any sort of order at my local toy stores, so you could spend quite a bit of time going through pegs looking for a particular figure. Rather than just displaying one figure and having the rest in storage, I use these pegs to have all of the figures displayed, sort of, and allow for some classic style peg hunting. Next is a galaxy far, far away, the Star Wars Vintage Collection. These are modern recreations of the vintage-style Star Wars figures of the late 70s and early 80s, divided up into 3 sections. The top section features figures from Star Wars, or Episode 4 A New Hope as it's now called, followed by The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. To be honest, I don't even remember what's here, so this will be a great opportunity to do some inventory. There's Luke from the Death Star escape, Obi-Wan and Han Solo, and in behind that we have Tatooine Luke and Ponda Baba. There's Greedo and a custom Yavin Ceremony Princess Leia, and a Cantina Patron and a Rebel Trooper. What's that foul stench? No, it's not Stinkor, it's Governor Tarkin, along with Vader, and a Death Star Trooper, and a Sand Trooper, another Sand Trooper, and a droid with a bad motivator, X-Wing pilot Luke, and a Sand Person, Dr. Evazan, and a vintage repro of Boba Fett. Then we have the Empire Strikes Back collection, with Hoth Luke and Han, a Hoth Trooper, and an Echo Base Han, Hoth Leia and 3PO, Bosk the Bounty Hunter, and Dak, Luke's Snowspeeder co-pilot, and a Leia that truly belongs among the clouds. Then we have Vader on an Empire card, and an AT-AT commander, IG-88, and a Stormtrooper, a Snow Trooper, and Boba on an Empire card, and some more bounty hunters. There's Bespin, Luke, and Han, and a couple of Return of the Jedi figures because there wasn't space anywhere else, Sandstorm Leia from a deleted scene, and General Lando. There's two of the most handsome devils from Star Wars, Yoda and Bespin Lando.
You can call me Billy D.
Yes, Lando. Yes. A Cloud Car pilot and Snowspeeder pilot Luke. For the Return of the Jedi section, there's a Death Star Luke on Jabba's Palace Luke card, and a custom Palace Disguise Lando, a Skiff Dude and Sandstorm Lando, a Boba on Jedi card, and another Skiff Dude, Endor Leia and R2 from Jabba's Skiff. Somebody's been doing her crunches. Palace Leia and a regular R2. And a Stormtrooper and Colonel Kraken. Custom carded Emperor and Vader Electric Boogaloo Edition. TIE Fighter Pilot and a custom carded Salacious B. Crumb, aka Snoke. Think about it. And a couple of Rebel pilots. Biker Scout and a Gamorrean Guard, another Skiff Dude and Pruneface, and more Skiff / Jabba's Palace dudes. Why are there so many of these guys? And Yub-Nub, some Ewoks off to the side. There's Death Star Luke again, but on the correct card this time. And Endor Han. It's a trap! Akbar and Jedi Knight Luke. A Rebel, and the guy who can't do any more good back there, Wedge. There's Chewie, Lando's Falcon co-pilot, and a custom Rancor Keeper. And three of my favorites of this collection, custom carded Jedi Spirits, Anakin Skywalker, Yoda, and Obi-Wan. I covered them briefly in part 4 of the museum tour. Boxed Bravestarr in 3030. Despite his mystic powers, he hasn't been able to bust out of this package in over 30 years.
Strength of the bear!
And growing up a G.I. Joe fan, I naturally loved the short-lived Rambo line by Coleco.
We need Rambo! Rambo, force of freedom!
They were basically giant Joes that came with awesome accessories.
With guns, with knives, with his bare hands.
Although his articulation was awful.
I don't want it.
That's too bad, because you're stuck with it.
I only have 3 carded Rambo figures in my collection, but they're the 3 that matter. Colonel Samuel Troutman, and the 2 versions of John J. Rambo. The back of the card features all the other figures that were available, including all of the villains General Warhawk would send against Rambo.
You send that many, don't forget one thing.
What?
A good supply of body bags.
Oh. Hasbro, Mattel, and Kenner get mentioned the most when talking about the great vintage toys of the 80s, but I think Coleco deserves to be included in the conversation too. Their Sectars were super fun and looked amazing, and the Rambo line was a great upsized alternative for fans of the military-themed Joes. Since space is limited, I've got some other figures filling up the backs of the pegs here. It keeps the display fresh to be able to quickly switch things around every so often. Behind the Rambo figures are some modern carded turtles. There's a movie version of Leonardo, along with classics versions of Bebop and Rocksteady.
Now you boys have fun together, and we'll be back to check on you in about 10 years.
Moving on, we've got the Earth Core from Inhumanoids.
Geologist Herc Armstrong battles the Inhumanoids with his grappling hook, grabber, and guts. Hot-headed and thick-skinned, Augur traded in his golden gloves for a power drill. Some say Liquidator marches to a different drummer. Dr. Derek Bright is a geologist and inventor. He's got a big ego. That's okay, because he's a genius.
These are the only figures I have protective clamshells for, because the cards are unpunched and I didn't have the heart to pop the peg holes out. The cards feature info about the suits on the back, along with character bios. And in behind the Earth Core are more Turtles figures, this time the Classics animated versions.
Don't panic, Michelangelo! I'll set you free!
No need to set anyone free here since I have loose versions of these great figures over on the Turtle shelf, which I covered in part 2. These cards wonderfully capture the look and feel of the original Playmates Turtles figures. Even though they're hidden in the back at the moment, I'm sure they'll soon be more prominently displayed.
You'd better, or else I'm gonna get sarcastic.
Next up is the crown jewel of the mint on card wall, the G.I. Joe collection.
They're looking good, Sergeant.
Pardon me, General, but I'm a major. You want to know what it was like to be a kid in the 80s? This is what it was like. Now you don't have to imagine staring up at a colossal wall of America's daring, highly trained Special Mission Force. So much color, so many personalities, so many figures and accessories. It truly was the golden age of toys, and gold doesn't tarnish. I get the same feeling looking at this wall as I did back in the 80s. Like the Star Wars figures, these are modern versions of the Joes, which capture the same look and feel, but for a fraction of the price.
Stop jawing and start digging!
Sir, yes sir! Alright, let's see who we have here. Cobra Commander, Destro and the Baroness, Hooded Cobra Commander, an Eel, and an Iron Grenadier Destro who will remain carded forever.
You will not rescue him?
He got himself into this. He can get himself out.
Darklawn and Zorana, and Battle Armor Cobra Commander. There's Major Blood, Storm Shadow and Firefly, Cobra Officer, Storm Shadow version 2, and another Eel. Crocmaster, a Cobra Trooper, and Serpentor. Roadblock version 2, Iceberg and Big Lob. Psych Out, a vintage Captain Gridiron, and it looks like Law and Order are on the loose. As well as Barrel Roll and Toll Booth. And a carded Bullhorn. There's General Hawk and Triple T driver Sergeant Slaughter, as well as Beachhead stinking up his bubble.
I want to talk to you about your deodorant. What do you mean? I don't use deodorant. That's what I want to talk to you about.
Lowlight from one of the post-anniversary lines, and a mail-away version of the Sarge.
Punch through the wall!
He may be able to punch through walls, but he can't punch through glue-reinforced bubbles. And he's got the right of might, Salvo. And a card for Crazy Legs, Retaliation Roadblock, whose body works great for a custom modern slaughter, and Topside. There's Bazooka, Shipwreck, and Footloose, Quick Kick, Airtight, and a Bat. Tiger Force versions of Duke and Flint, 85 style Snake Eyes and Timber, Barbecue, and Keelhaul, Rodimus Prime in human form from Transformers Season 3, a Snow Serpent and Zartan, another Snake Eyes and Crimson Guardsman, Blowtorch, Spirit and Mutt, Duke with Jetpack, Covergirl, and Dreadnought Ripper, version 1 of Roadblock, Flint and Lady J, Dreadnought Buzzer, Wild Bill, and Matt Tracker from Mask.
Tracker's gonna lead the mission.
There's Gung Ho, Torpedo, and Snow Job. Looks like Frostbite escaped to a cooler climate. There's a Steel Brigade soldier, and Sneak Peek, Airborne, Doc, and Tripwire. Dreadnought Torch, Jinx, and General Flag. Stalker, 82 style Snake Eyes, and Scarlet. Transformers RC in human form. Arctic Snake Eyes, and Pilot Scarlet. Rock and Roll, Flash, and Duke. A Cobra Viper, Grand Slam, and Tan Grunt. Whew! These cards don't just homage the original figures on the front. The backs feature little thumbnails of other figures along with the classic style file card. Next is another powerhouse of the 80s toy world. In fact, he's the most powerful man in the universe, He-Man. These are from the 2000X relaunch of He-Man.
Release them, you evil witch, or I'll...
You'll do nothing! Excuse me. I've got the commemorative reissues of the originals on another wall, but I like how these figures look as well. They're what I imagine the Masters of the Universe would look like in real life without any major changes to the original characters' looks.
Just mussed my hair.
There's 3 figures per peg.
Uh-oh, that wall looks hungry.
There's He-Man and Man-at-Arms. a UK bright red version of Orko and Merman, and the regular dark red Orko and Prince Adam, Stratos and Tila, Cyclone and Skeletor.
You're a loser, Skeletor.
Well, somebody's in a mood today. Too Bad and Trapjaw, Ram Man and the chase version of Manny Faces, a rare Zodak on red card, and Buzz-Off, who I've called B-Guy since 1984. Whiplash and the real evil witch, Evil Lyn, Mechanic and Roboto, Beastman and the chase version of Mechanic, Triclops and the regular Manny Faces. Since many of these figures don't stand well on their own, but feature amazing sculpts by the Four Horsemen, and nice big bubbles and packaging that captures the original feel, it's one of the few lines that I think actually looks better on the card than opened up.
Guess again, lobster lips.
Underneath is a small Silverhawks collection, still mint and shiny thanks to being sealed on a card for over 30 years.
Very funny.
This is another line I don't mind having sealed on card because the chrome paint is especially susceptible to damage from handling or dust. We've got Quicksilver with Tallyhawk, Bluegrass with Sideman, Stargazer with Slybird, Steel Will with Stronghold.
Boy, am I glad to see you, kid.
The Copper Kid with Mayday on a different style card that doesn't feature character art. And the reason I've made sure no light can get into the 80s Toy Museum, the only guy who might actually be able to burst out of his bubble, Monstar. The backs of these cards are still super glossy and feature pictures of the other figures, the big-sized birds, and the Mirage, which uncomfortably fits 5 Silverhawks. Did I mention it's on like Tron? Being a big Tron fan, I'm naturally a fan of Reboot as well, the 90s computer animated series by Mainframe. This collection includes Glitch Bob and the incredibly rare Web Bob.
You just can't talk in these things.
Ray Tracer, the search engine. Enzo's main squeeze, Andrea. Andrea's main squeeze, Enzo. And another rare figure that saw limited release, a Web Rider. There's some Binomes and a Megabyte, which has a surprisingly awesome sculpt and paint job.
Yes. It's rather good, isn't it?
Shredder could show up anytime, any place.
And behind the last of the Silverhawks figures are a Shredder from the early 2000s and a future Cobra Commander from Transformers Season 3. And the last Reboot figure, Enzo's sister, Dot. And there's Splinter from the 2000s Turtles series, and my favorite Turtles character, Casey Jones.
Woohoo! Goongala!
Next up is c.o.p.s, which stands for
Central Organization of Police Specialists.
Like Rambo, these were like upsized G.I. Joes. Even more so than Rambo since these were made by Hasbro as well, and featured the same body construction and articulation as G.I. Joes. It was also one of the rare toy lines from the 80s that took place in the future.
Fighting crime in a future time.
Like G.I. Joe, it featured artwork of other characters on the back, along with a file card fleshing out the character's past and personality. This collection includes the leader, Bulletproof.
It's crime fighting time.
A character who may be a descendant of G.I. Joe's Beachhead, the MP Checkpoint, and the Crook Hyena. And we've got a movie turtle Raphael in behind that I couldn't fit anywhere else. He's not the leader, but he's the poster boy of c.o.p.s, Long Arm. And Barricade, and there's enough plastic used on this guy for 2 or 3 figures. Big Boss. And an April from the 2000s Turtle series who can't be too happy about being stuck behind Big Boss.
April sure was mad.
Oh well, you know women.
No, we don't. She's the first one we ever met.
There's Sergeant Mace, Nightstick, and Dr. Bad Vibes with Buzz Bomb.
Because I say so, that's why.
And a movie Michelangelo. And the last c.o.p.s figure, Sundown, with a rare snake armor He-Man. And am I missing a movie turtle?
It should be right here.
Ah, movie Donatello. And the card is beat up badly. The bubble's lifting off the card, and it looks like he's used up all of his staff's magic. But I picked up this Visionary's Lexor for next to nothing at a local toy show, just to have one of them on the mint on card wall.
The arrows turn, the swords rebel, may nothing pierce this mortal shell!
And finishing off the wall in the top right corner are some Classics Thundercats figures from Bandai. Like the 2000X He-Man figures, these capture the look of the originals with improved sculpts and packaging that beautifully homages the original carded figures. A much more affordable alternative to owning the original carded figures. Only 2 larger sized figures were released in the line, Lion-O and Tigra.
I'm being mummified!
Amazing how many of these figures are claustrophobic. For the second wave of the Classics line, the size of the figures was scaled down. They released a Lion-O with ferocious face sculpt and Mun-Ra. And that's my mint on card wall in the 80s Toy Museum. A little slice of your favorite 80s toy store. Because these classic characters weren't just held up by morals and virtues, they were held up by pegs as well, literally. And there's just something magical about seeing them displayed the same way they were the first time I saw them as a kid. As well as peg hunting to find buried plastic treasures. Got a peg hunting memory you'd like to share? Scroll down and go to town. To support this channel and join in the fun, head over to patreon.com/MichaelMercy. And to join the tribe, hit subscribe. Nerdmaste.